How long does the buying process take? This is from Ethan T. in Irvine, California. Ethan, this is kind of a loaded question. And what I mean by that is I don't know what stage of the buyer process you're in right now. If you let's assume you haven't even started whatsoever. Maybe you're looking at websites right now for homes for sale, and you're just trying to figure out like what part of I think you said you were in Irvine. What part of Irvine that you were looking at? Do you want to be close to Spectrum? Do you want to be more inland? Like your kids play soccer? Do you want to be close to Great Field Sports Park, Great Sports Field, or whatever that's called with a big balloon up there? We play soccer up there all the time. So at first, I would try to figure out the location of where you wanted to be, and then I would start to just drive the neighborhoods. This would always be the first thing that I would do before I actually formalized the process, because looking at homes online is one thing. Actually driving through the neighborhood is something totally different. Oftentimes you get a totally different vibe than maybe you can find online. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. It could go both ways. But from a straight time frame process on what does the buying process look like, let's assume that you've already know the areas you're looking for. I'm going to assume that you've already spoken to a lender. I'm going to assume that everything's pretty formalized. You've already got your real estate agent that you're working with, and now it's like, okay, it's time to pull the trigger. It's go time right now. What's the time frame that I could probably expect? Well, if you have clarity with your real estate agent, here's what I wrote down. If you have clarity with your real estate agent and you've narrowed the areas down, most of our clients are finding the home that they're looking to purchase within about 3 to 8 showings. 3 to 8 showings. Now, this number used to be a lot bigger earlier on, and that's a little bit smaller now because inventory is different. I would argue that in most parts of Southern California, about 30% of the inventory right now is not what we would call sellable inventory. So assuming that, like I said, you have clarity on that and you're only looking at the homes that fit the criteria of what you're looking for. Keep in mind the buying process, it gets crazy once you start looking at all the homes that are not a fit for comparison reasons, right? All that does is muddy the water and it stresses you out. It makes the buying process a lot harder. So I think it's going to take probably 2 to 3 weekends to look at 8 homes. I wouldn't rush through them. Sometimes you're going to walk in that front door and you're like, I already know this isn't a fit. Trust me when I tell you, you're not going to offend anybody. Tell your real estate agent, hey, you know what? This one's not a fit. Let's turn around and walk right out the door. The most important thing that you can do is tell them why this wasn't a fit, why I don't like this. What struck me is, why did I like it online, but I don't like it here? Just be clear about that. Once you find the home and you write the offer, I want you to allocate about 3 days for negotiations going back and forth. Now, if you're way apart on the negotiation, it may take a little longer. If there's a bunch of offers on the home, may take a little longer, maybe up to 10 days is probably what I would forecast for that. Once you're under contract, we've got a whole bunch of checklist items you have to do the first 17 days. Deposit earnest money, you get the financing started, inspections, all of that fun stuff. The contingency period in California is 17 days, followed by a negotiation of what you find in that contingency period. It's important to understand that in California, by default, the California residential purchase contract is an as-is sale, meaning when you write that contract to them, you are agreeing to purchase that home in as-is condition. Now, you've got a bunch of options at your disposal, which we'll cover in a different topic about what would happen in the contingencies. And in fact, I think we even have a question today around some of those contingencies, but we've got 17 calendar days, not business days, not weekdays, but calendar days to complete all those contingencies. And then after that, it takes about 12 to 25 days to formally close the home. And that's largely dictated by the financing process and how rock solid that financing process is. Now, when you execute the contract between a buyer and a seller at the beginning of the process, you actually agree on the closing date on that contract. And sometimes that's a formal date like October 15th, 2025. It could be 45 days after, successful execution of contract. Maybe it's a bunch of offers and you don't really care about the closing date, but you need 45 days to close or 35 or 32 days. And then once that contract closes, the listing agent and the buyer agent will send an email together acknowledging what that formal close of escrow date is based on their interpretation of the contract. And then it goes over to title and escrow. And remember, escrow's job is to execute the instructions of the contract. It's not to take the listing agent side. It's not to take the buyer's agent side. It's to execute the rules and the dictation of the purchase contract. So they will tell you at the end of the day what that closing date is. Those final 12 to 25 days, that's when we get all the repairs done. That's when we make sure the appraisal gets taken care of. That's when all of the final loan stuff is getting handled. That's like all of that what we call the hurry up and wait process of buying a home. Can you close early? You can. The listing agent or the seller does need to agree to close early. You cannot unilaterally buy the home earlier or later than when agreed. If you go over the closing date, we need an approval from the seller as well. And that is a breachable event, meaning if you go past the close of escrow date, they can give you what's called a cure notice, and you've got a couple days to perform on that. And if you don't, they can cancel the deal. They can collect all the earnest money, and you can move on, right? So we want to make sure that everything in that contract is honored. But if you had to take all of that and loop it into one, showings, negotiations, contingencies, and lending process, I think probably all in, you're at about 50 days. So if you're trying to factor like a move-in date with like maybe a move-out date with a previous home you're selling, or maybe there is a lease that you're in that's expiring, you've got to be out by a certain day, I would definitely try to time the home purchase about 15 days before that deadline. That way we've got a little bit of room to play. I've seen way too many clients in the 20 years we've been doing this try to schedule a move-out day and closing day on the same. It's way too stressful. Don't do that. Yeah, there's a little bit more money involved, but trust me when I tell you, you want to give yourself a buffer because it's going to make the process a lot easier.